pleasure being with Party. He started Star Wars CCG back near the beginning of Premiere. Played for a while. Played some other CCGs concurrently, and I think you said you discovered kind of your card collection back in your 30s after you moved back home, and discovered GIMP during COVID, after COVID, somewhere around there. And you've kind of been around ever since. So um,
Yep.
yeah, no, thank you for being here. We've played several games many different times, had some communication, so it's nice to put a face to the online person. So thank you for being here.
Same. Appreciate you taking the time, Bill.
Awesome, cool. So we had a couple of requests. So let me share my screen, and you had a couple of items we could talk about. Let me share everything, and we will show it all. All right, cool. All right, so let's go for the first one. So one person requested TTO. They wanted, how do I make TTO work? So one
hmm
interesting thing is that there's a lot of options, Premiere Death Star 2 for how to do, some kind of a space package, right? You can do kind of the regular indoor operations. You can run it kind of pretty much the space package. You can do things like, ISB space. We had someone, show recently, like I think COTVG did like a bring them before me space. There's tie space. There's lots of different ways to play space. So I think you said this is one of your favorite decks, TTO. So why do you like TTO so much, and what does this package offer uniquely?
Yeah. So my favorite thing about Star Wars CCG is thematic decks. I'm a sucker for thematic decks. So anytime there's a theme to the deck, whether it's profit, whether it's there's good in him, bring him before me, hunt down, TTO. I love themes. I also love themes that are off meta or aren't necessarily going to be seen as much. So TTO really does it for me. Obviously, being a fan of the Death Star 2, being a fan of the entire Return of the Jedi. As a kid, I loved Return of the Jedi. Its flaws didn't stand out to me as a kid as much as it did an adult. So I fell in love with it. But TTO as a platform is great because you get a huge amount of activation very easily. And you don't have to use a lot of tricks for it. So the start to the objective uses a different starting interrupt that's unique to the objective, and that's called Operation as Planned. What that does is it allows you to pull out a specific card that's designed for the objective, Desperate Counter, which is going to be basically your engine to pull out your starting effects. That gets you your Imperial Arrest Order, that gets you your combat response, which allows you to deploy your matching pilots as well as grab your docking bays and whatnot. It also has a slight other kind of effect that really doesn't come into play at all, which is kind of stupid. They could have made that a lot better. But again, what TTO does is it gets you the Death Star down on turn one, orbiting Endor, and it gives you the ability to pull out Moff Jerajad. And Moff Jerajad essentially allows you then to pull out all of the locations that you're needing to get that thing operational, which is the epic event that's associated to the objective. So with that thing's operational, it's actually a different variant of the Endor operations objective, which you can play in a variety of ways, or more commonly known as EOPS. But with the Endor operations objective, you're able to start with the Endor system, the bunker, the landing platform. So right there, you've got 4 force going for you, and then with the TTO variant of it, pulling the Death Star 2 as well as Moth Jerajad and the starting effect Desperate Counter after turn one without mobilization points, without any other additional force modifiers, you're looking at a minimum of the 4 force from the Endor operations start, which is 2 from Endor, 1 from the platform, 1 from the bunker, 2 from the Death Star 2 system. And typically you can firsthand pull one of the 3 locations that are the sectors that you're going to be deploying to Death Star 2. So you'll get the capacitors, the coolant shaft, and the reactor core down, hopefully by turn 2, turn 3 at the latest. Obviously, with draw odds, sometimes that can get stretched out and sometimes become problematic. But with a great start, you can be looking at generating, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 force without even having to play mobilization points. So that's one thing I love about it is it keeps you that flexibility of being able to have a lot of force on turn 2 to help you to gain momentum early, right? The thing about TTO is it's not a really, really strong, it's not a strong deck in the long game, right? You've got very, very small margins. You're using a lot of cards on the table. So it's very, 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 very live by the sword, die by the sword, which is why I love this objective. It gets me excited every time I play it. It is a fast deck. You get on the table fast, and you can do damage really fast. Kind of like Profit for the dark side, but not quite as powerful. Um, so once you're able to get down with that first turn, your goal is, I guess, let's just pause there for a second. Does that make sense, Bill, as far as an introduction?
No, I think that's good. So basically, what you like is you like, it's a little bit different, and but you can also activate a lot of force really quickly.
Correct.
And yes, and the objective is damage. So once you get this out here and you're able to kind of move kind of, the Death Star 2 system, you can start, really hurting them. So yeah, no, it does make sense. And I guess it's interesting because you're right. Mobilization points is like a near must have for almost every other type of deck. And it's interesting, of course, that your deck doesn't have mobilization points. Is it just because you're just trying to be different and not use it, or you think it's really not necessary given all your sectors and that you're mostly
Mm-hmm.
space? Or help me understand that bit.
Yeah, so it doesn't need a place in the deck. And so I like to build decks that aren't restrictive to specific cards. And again, like one theme that you'll find a lot of times, like the guys that I like to play with a lot, Joe Horby, people like Pipe 29. I play a lot with Tony. I play a lot with usually people in the morning. But a lot of the guys that I get real techie with, Joe and SWC player, um, people that kind of are way better at this game than that I learn from, that I like to associate with. They make fun of me because I'm constantly doing crazy stuff, but it's crazy stuff that can beat them every now and again, maybe 30% of the time if I'm lucky. Um, Maybe not even that much, but we have fun and we're good buddies, so it's all good. And
Yeah,
so again, one of the fun things is not having to use a card that everybody expects, right? So like
sure.
if you use Imperial Arrest Order and mobilization points, you're going to occupy a Docky Bay, you're going to sit on the Death Star Cloud City, you're going to drain for 2 to 3, and you're gonna spread and control the board. I ain't got time for that, man. I'm just not in this to play to win and feel good about winning. I'm in this to play to have to feel good about how I won, to feel good
Sure.
about how the game went. I want to laugh. I want to see my opponents cringe without having to play Brangus. I want to be like, wow, I didn't see that if I'm battling at Endor and the Death Star is orbiting Endor, I get to add a battle destiny. Holy crap! They didn't know that card text existed on the capacitors, and and so therefore now all of a sudden I'm going into battle with two battle destiny. There are fun things about this deck among other decks that I like to play that are kind of hidden in the weeds. And so that's a perfect example of one of them. So with this deck, you essentially are playing a trick deck that deals a massive amount of damage fast and leaves very few verticals to attack. Um, and that is again why I like TTO. Pause.
I
It's
like it.
not a very high A, B, or even maybe C level deck as far as its competitiveness. It will get washed 9 times out of 10 by X Wings. But there are some things in here that to combat essentially the hardest matchup, which is a classic X Wings deck. Um, and so again, those you're going to see card choices in here that reflect situations where I can try to either get out ahead of X Wings or draw X Wings into a situation where I can beat them down. So,
Yeah.
um, what kind of questions do you have otherwise for TTO? Kind of want to talk more about the goals of the objective, sort of.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and thank you for that introduction. And I agree with you in many ways. I mean, I'm a tinkerer myself, and I like to win in unusual ways sometimes. And I think there's a time and place for doing a type deck. I'm here to win a tournament. There's times to just make a deck for fun, and we all have decks for fun and decks for winning. And no, you're not unique in that. And it is one enjoyable thing playing about you because you do have lots of variance and you're able to kind of make perhaps maybe on an A level suboptimal, but really do these tech decks and trick people, and I love it. So no, I think from objective point of view, right? I mean that thing's operational. The penuptialate, you know, thing you get from this, and you get it from putting down the reactor core eventually. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I guess my feeling is that this really you really need to occupy another system. So it means you need to not occupy indoor, right? Which means you
Correct.
need another system. So you put three systems in your deck, and you
Mm-hmm.
really want to deploy someone to there. So help me understand kind of like kind of the turns. Like is it because I guess what it's minimum turn four you get to activate this, or like what's the earliest realistically you kind of
Yep.
your plan? Yeah.
Yep. So you can get it out on turn one if you draw all the locations and then you pull, that thing's operational. That has never happened to me in a game. Turn two, turn three is going to be where you're going to typically find success as far as getting all three of the sectors out to the Death Star. Um, so one thing with that is Moff Jerajad. And so if you read Moff Jerajad's text, you can see that he's got a specific ability. Um, so maybe if you could shift click on him, you can kind of bring him up.
Yep.
So yeah, so what he's able to do is he can pull a Death Star 2 sector or the super laser into your hand, and he also prevents spies from deploying to the Death Star 2 site that he occupies. So this is really important. Your turn one always with this deck is going to be Moff Jerajard getting the desperate counter effect pulling Imperial Arrest Order pulling Death Star Docking Bay, Moff Jerajard going down to Death Star Docking Bay. First action. Always, always, always. What that's going to do is going to allow you to start pulling your sectors out. And the cool thing about Moff Jerajad is that he doesn't let spies deploy there. And then if you read the Death Star 2 system text, they don't allow for revolution at Death Star 2 locations. So
Yes.
you're actually providing Moff Jerajard with a bastion of of protection where he literally cannot be assaulted unless somebody, I have no answers for how they could backdoor their way in. You can't neighbor over. You can't get to Moff Jerajard on the Death Star. Okay, so you get him down turn one. You start pulling the sectors out. And one thing with TTO is you have to do this before you activate, like on turn two and turn three. That's something that people forget a lot. Is your first action at the beginning of each turn after you get him on the table is to pull out a sector. So a lot of people will activate and they'll forget and they'll have to, take a revert, go back, and it's one of those actions that you can do at any time during your turn. Um, so again, kind of the way that I pilot this deck is I get Jarajar down, I get the sectors out. In turn one, I'm not going to have enough force to do both Jarajad and a TIE fighter. Sometimes you can if they're playing an objective that gives you like 3 or 4 force, or 2 or 3 force. Like if they're playing Prophet, and you get a couple of dark side icons. Sometimes you can get enough force to get down a cheap tie, but rarely that happens on turn one. But turn two, I'm getting down to Endor with a TIE fighter. I want to occupy that system and I want to threaten a drain. I also want to potentially invite them to come down to the table because this deck has counter beat potential. And the best thing I can do is to get somebody on Endor system as soon as possible. I want to fight people with this deck. I want to fight people in space. You'll notice that there are a lot of space kind of tricks in this deck, whether it's Gravity Shadow, I Can Shake 'em, Relentless Pursuit, Flawless Marksmanship. You've got cards in there to hurt people in space. And the cool thing about the specific ties that are in this deck are as you have Saber 1, which obviously is as far as I'm concerned the first if not second best TIE fighter in the game, and then you have Scythe 1, which is again arguable 1A to 1B with Saber 1 as far as what they can do as spaceships. Scythe 1 essentially is a cheat code. You can move it along with the Death Star. You can send the Death Star out to another planet. You can move laterally with Scythe after the Death Star moves. You can make an additional move, and then you can go shoot somebody. So a common strategy that you'll see, especially in later expansions, like against Watch Your Step and some of the Jabba's Palace Seal deck or classic Novi formats, is you park the Scythe 1 at the Death Star 2. You wait for them to deploy a ship. then you move the Death Star 2 towards that system, and then you fly Scythe over to that system during your move phase, and you shoot down somebody's ship, and they can't do a damn thing about it. You couple that with some Talon rolls, you couple that with flawless marksmanship, you can start taking down some pretty strong rebel ships. You can even shoot down Home One with him, which is crazy. Because the matching pilot to Scythe One is Major Mianda, and he adds 2 to all shots. So you're looking at a lot of juicy tie kills if this deck is allowed to fight people in space.
This version of the tie cannon is not, is not it's not Starfighter only. So no bonus
Correct.
here. So you have to be an 8 for this, but you're right, he adds 2. So if you get Mianda and you have a 6 to track, I guess. I don't know, maybe you can't track a 6 here, but I guess, I guess you're basically you need flawless marksmanship. If you have Mianda, flawless marksmanship, and a cannon, you can kind of shoot this with ease, I'm guessing.
You got it. You got it. So you get a 5 plus 4 plus 2. You're looking at 11 total defense with just a 5 draw if you capture the opportunity of flawless marksmanship plus Mianda on Home One, and see you later, Super Home One. Nothing you can do. But that to be said, that's not my primary defense for Home One packages. This
Mm-hmm.
deck has the Super Laser, which again is a card that people forget about. There have been so many games that I've played where I've goaded people into spaceships, space fights, where they come along with their Home One fully loaded with Han, Leia, Chewie, Akbar, you name it, Wedge, Red Leader, and they forget the Super Laser gets to draw 3 destinies and fire at capital ships. So good game, Home One. You're not going to get very far against the Super Laser. So that's one of the kind of cool aspects of this deck is people that are playing any light side capital ships. You're not going to be in a good situation if you're going to be battling anywhere near the system that the Death Star 2 is orbiting. And the whole purpose of the objective is to orbit a location and then to hurt them by occupying that location. So it really works synergistically if you can establish a space threat, get them down to Endor to fight you, and if they don't come to Endor, then you're holding Sullust or you're holding Kashyyyk or Fondor in this case. It's just a system that's in the parsecs that are nearby. Then they're forced to come to stop your TTO. And if they don't want to stop you in space, then they're out training you or they're out fighting you elsewhere. So the whole premise of this deck is it's got a lot of weapons, it's got a lot of tricks, and it does a lot of damage. But the problem with it is there's almost no retrieval. It has to use a ton of cards, so your margins of victory are very small. So you have to be very comfortable playing by the seat of your pants. And really trying to get people to come to you, trying to get people to make mistakes. In the game of tennis, there's a strategy called pushing, where instead of trying to hit really good shots, you just hit the ball back, right? So instead of hitting winners and hitting it down the line and trying to pass your opponent, you're just hitting the ball back to them. Somebody who pushes against this deck is probably going to beat it 10 times out of 10 because it's just a bunch of tricks and a bunch of things that people aren't used to seeing. But if you put yourself in a bad position, you can really get bent out of shape pretty fast.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
No, it's definitely nice seeing Mianda. It's definitely nice seeing Fell, and obviously, I think the Death Star 2, once all its sectors are out, it can move, right? So it can move once all 3 are out. When it can start moving?
Yep. So you have to have that thing's operational on the table for it to actually be operational.
Yeah.
And so again, you're having this deck is very, very, very dependent, kind of like Hidden Base, where you can't afford to top deck until you have your sectors out. You have to really follow the deck. It's kind of more like an open deck where you've got a lot of cards that are pulling cards. You got a lot of cards that are telling you what you have to do. So TTO is kind of like a future look at what the game kind of evolved into, and that's kind of another reason why I like it, where it's like you have a lot more declarative strategy, and then outside of that declarative strategy, you get to kind of party McFly it up, as I would say,
Nice.
kind of make it your own. So Yeah, the a couple of the other things that are synergistic with this deck are the pilot of Saber 2, Major Turfinen allows you to pull out an Admiral's Order, right? That's awesome. That helps you to deal with X-Wings, it helps you to increase your drain damage, and it helps you to get your TIE fighter back if you lose him at Endor or at Sullust. And so I packaged the spaceport docking bay with fighters coming in and the system that I'm going to be claiming as my TTO orbit. And what that does is allows me to occupy a battleground at that system. It deals one more damage for the objective or the epic event. So now we're pinging 3. And it allows me to resuscitate a TIE fighter if it should die at that system. And so I love Major Turfinen. I love fighters coming in. I love Saber TIE interceptors because they're just, they're kind of the bee's knees when it comes to TIE fighters, maybe outside of the TIE defender. Um, and so that's kind of another element to the deck is you have to occupy a battleground. So there's Igar and Tempest 1, there's 2 Vaders with sticks, and there's a Pelp, just to provide that reinforcement on the ground. You're not trying to spread out a bunch. You're not trying to occupy a bunch of locations. You're trying to occupy 2 systems and 1 site.
Strictly speaking, though, to get this damage, obviously, what you would do if you occupied, say, the spaceport at Sullust here, it would be 1 extra damage, but you don't have to occupy another battleground site, correct? Just
Nope.
a
So
system.
you get 2 damage off of that thing is operational for occupying the system that the Death Star orbits. For each additional site, you get +1 damage. So if I used a bunch of like Raltier sites or the special edition sites, you could increase the X quotient, or the X variable of that thing's operational. Um, I haven't seen a deck where that's utilized because you can only pull the 1 docking bay. If there was a card that allowed me to maybe pull 9 unique locations, then I'd maybe consider a crazy strategy. But if you can get 3 extra damage out of your objective and you're able to satisfy honor, that's usually enough to do what you want with ping damage.
That makes sense. Yeah, and I imagine, of course, this is probably the most frustrating thing because you need 3 battlegrounds, and
Yep.
yeah, and that's typically hard for the dark side to satisfy, at least till mid game, right?
It is. It is. So you're definitely able to get the landing platform. You're definitely able to get one of the systems. So typically on turn 2, turn 3, you're not able to satisfy honor yet. But once you get, either Vader and the Emperor or Tempest 1 or you know, anything that's strong enough to to hold a position, um then you can usually do all right. Again, there's a little bit of nuance to this deck because it is so linear that you have to make sure you're not um, pigeonholing yourself. So you can't deploy Vader down to go chase somebody on Tatooine. You can't throw a Tie Fighter up. You can't waste your ships. You can't waste your characters. It's all very very low margin, um, very scenario based. There are a couple cards in here that may seem kind of interesting. Um, Point Man, obviously, that's just kind of a staple because order to engage can really kill you if they stack a mains deck and just follow you from docking bay to docking bay. That's gonna kick your ass. So that's a card that I obviously have to play against. Project Telepathy, so many people are playing Anger Fear Aggression these days that if you don't have that card in your deck, you're unable to play against a lot of threats. Plus, it
Yeah.
has utility in preventing a battle sometimes, stopping a drain. Towards the end of the game, it can be one of the best cards in your deck. Project Telepathy, that is.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree.
Monic is in there, obviously, just because if you're playing X Wings, the only way you're going to beat X Wings is if you somehow get an early Monic or you catch a Gravity Shadow and you bang on their X Wing. You're going to lose otherwise. I just hate to. It's almost. I beat Idea Track Linden in a tournament game like 3 years ago because I was playing a variant of this deck where you use Saber 4, and he allows you to deploy as a react into a battle, and I beat him down. Um, sometimes I'll use Saber 4 just for that added surprise. So what Saber 4 allows you to do is deploy to a react where you have a Saber squadron. So it's kind of like Black 4 but on steroids. Um,
No, it's
so
good.
again,
Yeah.
yeah, that's like the only time I've ever like won a meaningful game against X Wings. Not to put Lyndon on blast, he's a better player than I, but that was a fun game. I remember 2022 maybe. Um, but yeah, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. There's not a lot of crazy. Sometimes I'll change the dreadnoughts out for Death Star class Star Destroyers, the ones that have the immunity to attrition. Uh, because uh, look, sometimes the difference between winning a game can be, did you draw a high enough destiny to shoot that X-wing, right? Did you hit 5 to blow up that 4 maneuver or that 5 maneuver ship? Were you able to shoot down the Millennium Falcon and not get 5 battle destinies drawn at you? Um, if you draw a 1, you're not going to be able to shoot down the Falcon, period, right? Sometimes when you draw a 2 and you have a oppressive enforcement on the table, that 2 becomes a 3. Now that 3 becomes a 6 with the cannons, and all of a sudden you've now just, shot down the Falcon. Um, so that Star Destroyer with the that may seem like a expensive, shitty Star Destroyer with a 1 ability pilot. Well, it has a 2 in that upper right corner, and sometimes that can be the difference. So I like to use capital ships that have higher destiny value and ones that aren't so expensive. And so sometimes I go in between using the Death Squad Star Destroyer. Sometimes I use Dreadnoughts. Sometimes I use the Chimera and the Executor. But I've just found that it's almost impossible with TTO to get the Executor on the table unless you first turn Fondor and you use a completely different strategy, which involves using Imperial Command ×3 Marajek and a completely different start to the game. So I've just kind of written the Executor off of most of my TTO builds. But a classic TTO build that I used to play a lot of involved Imperial Command, Admiral Pete, Commander Marajek, typical starts. And that gets your systems going down onto the table. But I've just found that doesn't provide the value that that the more broad-based red tricks do. Red tricks meaning the space interrupts.
Yeah, I was waiting for an opportunity to ask you. So yeah, no, I mean you're going more with the kind of the TIE fighter theme. Obviously, the dreadnoughts stack with the TIE fighters because they give them power +1, and they have
Mm-hmm.
the hyperspeed, and they explicitly can move them, and they're obviously
Mm-hmm.
cheaper than Executor or some of the other ships. So I get that. I was a little bit curious about Marajek though, because I mean Marajek could also go on a dreadnought. Marajek could go to a docking bay.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you don't have mobilization points. I guess he wouldn't do much. Is there a reason you avoided Marajek just because he's so common, or is there something else to that?
No, it's Marajek or Goddard, right? And so, am I going to get beat by Landing Claw? Yes. Am I going to get beat because I didn't get a system out? Yes. So if I pack 3 systems and use a little bit of Landing Claw cover, then maybe I'm in a better situation than just being able to get my systems out a little bit easier. And the thing is Marajek is great, but I don't think he's great unless you use Piet and Command ×3. Uh, Otherwise, you're still just trying to draw 1 card to get more cards out. And so I'd rather kind of construct the deck to give me the draw odds of the 3 locations rather than using 4 cards to have that guaranteed. I go back and forth. I've got probably 3 different versions of TTO. One of them that uses the Marajek Command Piet engine, but then again, you're having to decide: do I want to get Piet down turn 1 and then focus on Jerajad, or do I want to get Jerajad going and then get Pete going? And then it starts to what I'm trying to describe is this deck can start to, if you add too much to the early game, you screw yourself because you have too many things that you have to do. The deck activates a lot of force. It relies on you pulling pilots and ships out with combat response, so you can't activate too much force too quickly. And so you'll get into a situation with this deck often, if you don't know how to play it, where you're generating 16 force, 15, 16 force, but you only have 20 cards in a reserve deck. And now you got to play the, how many cards do I activate in order to pull the pilot that I want to get in order to do what I want to do on that turn? Um, So again, it kind of it can get a little heady, which again I love because I love chaos. That's my kind of my name in the game. I like chaos in Star Wars CCG without being corny. Like, uh, I don't play numbers. I don't play. I do play Sabak, so I guess that's my corny line. But I don't play it. I don't play it that often. Um, but I like to have fun without being a complete cheeseball.
I respect that. So yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I mean, yeah. You talk about packages. I mean, yes, you're right. You have a lot of red cards. You don't have a lot of space. A lot of space packages. You know, I thought it was interesting because you only had two sabers. I guess you have Mianda here, but yeah, you don't have a. You could have tried to put saber three, saber four. So you said you used to have saber three and saber four. And I'm guessing
Yep.
just because you wanted more gravity shadows, more monarchs, and stuff like that. I'm guessing.
I just don't lose the space. I lose the X Wings. And so I
Okay.
put in a bland tie interceptor and an extra cannon because you can drop a bland interceptor and shoot two ships.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, someone's got four X Wings out of location and they think they're going to organize the attack and be fine. You shoot two of them down, the other one have one power, and now they're fucked. And so your goal with, excuse my language, your goal with, again, combating a deck that you know will beat you is to create a scenario where you can beat them. I'm not going to beat X Wings by draining them. I'm not going to beat X Wings by activating security precautions at the late game. You know, I
Okay.
might get lucky if I do it and I guess their system, so I'm going to keep it in there for the 5 destiny and the activation. But my goal here is to gravity shadow or to draw my non-unique interceptor and a cannon and get them into a situation where they're ill prepared to deal with um, a couple TIE fighters that can really ramp up your power quickly. You have a dreadnought and two interceptors. I mean, that's you're looking at 6, 7, 14, almost 20 damage right there, or power, excuse me.
Yeah. No, okay. I like that bit. So basically, your primary use of gravity shadow is what? So if an X-wing's trying to get away, you're saying, because X-wing's what ability?
It's to stop hyper escape. If they put the two X Wings at each location and are trying to drain you for 5 or 6, right?
Yeah.
Or vice versa, if they're moving over to cover Kessel or to cover some large location, then you pop the last one that leaves, and then all of a sudden now you're able to deploy and try to beat them down a bit.
Okay. Yeah. And interesting, you have something special planned for them, but you don't in this version. You don't actually run a Star Destroyer. You just
That's
hand.
just that's just that's just to help against retrieval. The loops. So many people play on the edge and off the edge. That's literally only there for that. I could use grabbers, or I could use one of those with a 5 destiny. So I'll just put that 5, let it float around, and if I can draw it, great.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Well, okay, but you do have one grabber.
I do.
So yeah.
I think you're stupid if you don't have one grabber. I mean, like, you got to grab sense if they're playing TRM. You got to grab, there are certain cards if they're playing Sabak, if they're playing Voyeur or Visor Vision, like, you absolutely have to use one grabber. If you have a deck with no grabbers in it, you're not playing Star Wars CCG correctly.
Or you're
It's
taking out
stupid.
a big risk. Yes, yeah, they can do lots of loops, and you're right. They can cause you a lot of pain. That is very true.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I can't shake him. Makes perfect sense. You do have starship weapons. You actually have three starship weapons, which is more than most, but I get it, and I respect the fact that you're trying to make your interceptors work. I've seen lots of decks where you have lots of interceptors. This one you only did one, generic tie interceptor.
Mm-hmm.
Did you try like doing two tie interceptors and like two laser
I
can?
do.
Yeah,
I have TTOs with 2. I have TTOs with 5.
yeah,
The thing about the interceptors is that they're pretty low destiny, and if you're not playing Sonari fleet systems, it's like, you know, I don't know. I don't want to have too many of those in there
yeah,
because even the saber ties have like a 3 destiny, so it's like,
yeah.
to not use a saber tie and to choose a uh, a junky interceptor. No, I shouldn't say junky because they're freaking badass, but
Yeah.
they're just you don't want to. I don't need to use that many of them again. That thing is only in there to fight X Wings. That's it.
Okay. All right. I like that too. Relentless Pursuit. You are one of the few players that tries to make this work. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think Major Hushin, or however you say it, he is he likes to cancel lateral damage, and you do not use lateral damage. So,
Mm-mm.
so I always appreciate that about you. Um, you opted not to do lateral damage simply because you want Relentless Pursuit, or you're worried about being canceled, or why not? Because it's
It
also a
I
four.
just gets countered. It's too accounted for. I don't. Joe makes fun of me all the time for this, but like I don't like to use cards that even if they're good cards that everybody counters. When I make a deck, I make sure I don't get lateral damage. When you make a deck, do you think about lateral damage? Yeah, every time. So I'm just not going to use it.
Yeah. Okay. I get that
Sometimes
too.
I use sometimes I'll use I've lost R2, but I found Gravity Shadow to be a little bit better than that. But I've lost R2 can create beatdown scenarios as well. It's not that hard to draw greater than one, especially if you're using very limited characters. Uh, that can cause havoc for people, but it can be altered. So again, it's not as I don't know. It's good, but it's not again. It's not an often
Well,
played card.
yeah, I mean, I guess in this deck, your ability to pursue is, well, it's a little bit limited. I don't know, like a Star Destroyer deck. I mean, I think in Rabbit's ISB had I've lost R2.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what Dark Deal 44's Rop's deck has I've lost R2 because they're trying to
Mm-hmm.
isolate the like home one or a Super Falcon alone.
Yep.
Um, I guess in this way you don't like this card as much because I guess you have to go to them more, or yeah.
No, I do. I play it again. I could pull up a list that has this as well as lateral damage in it. It's just it's choosing to be um, more. I guess I've lost R2 in the super laser. You can shoot home one very easily. You park home one. You fly the Death Star over and you shoot it. Right.
Oh, I love
There's a
that.
lot of great. There's a great synergies with this card in this deck. I've used it in the past. Um, but when you're not as I guess like when I'm not using Star Destroyers as heavy, this deck again, I'm trying to fight you with my TIE fighters. And so I want you to deploy and I want to counter. So this deck is very, very, very counter centric. Um I've lost R2, I'm gonna walk you into a bad place, not necessarily counter you. I've lost R2 is I'm setting something up strategically and I'm walking you towards that destination, as opposed to Gravity Shadow is you now you're making a mistake and I'm gonna it capitalize on it immediately.
So one thing I was trying to understand is, you said that the TIE fighter deck gives a lot of trouble, and you put a lot of anti TIE fighter tech, right? You have the
X-Wing,
interceptor,
yeah.
right? Sorry, X-wing. Sorry, yeah. X-wings are issue. You have a lot of, because you can shoot down two with the generic, TIE interceptor. You can gravity shot to prevent them from running away. I mean, but I mean, I guess how does this deck go against other matchups like against Prophet? How does it go against
Profit, it's a race. It's not a great race, but it's a race. So you're not in a great matchup versus Profit. You're not in a great matchup versus X Wings. Um, TRM is usually something that you can handle because unless you're using a lot of revolutions on like Yavin sites, they're looking to battle and beat down or use a Super Falcon package. So this deck really isn't afraid of um, it's not afraid of space really. Like I'm not afraid of Wedge and Green Squadron and the Falcon. I'm afraid of a shitload of X-wings.
Okay.
I'm not afraid of Home One. I'm not afraid of uh the Liberty or whatever one, the Defiance that recirculates. Um, capital ships are great to fight.
Yeah. So, I mean, would you say this deck does really well against kind of like the light side version of combat response, like squadron assignments, like kind of like unique, like the
Mm-hmm.
unique pilot X-wing, kind of thing, Gold Squadron
Yeah,
One, that kind of stuff.
yeah, I think it does. I think it does great in general against light side decks that don't have a lot of uh, board presence. I would say. So if you're talking about decks that are full of characters and ships that can spread out, this deck again is it's going to struggle because you're not able to occupy a lot of locations with this deck. Um, but if you're dealing with like a very typical TRM, or you're dealing with um, like a mind what you have learned Jedi test training deck, like these are great decks to play against because they're slow, and TTO will just get out right ahead of them and deal a lot of damage. But the meta decks that you're playing against typically are going to be mind what you have learned, hidden mains, and TRM, and those are kind of how I like to think about my deck building strategies. It's like, what am I going to play? Well, I'm probably going to play, you know, hidden mains, TRM, or mind what you have learned, or if not, I'm going to play X Wings and I'm going to get smoked. So let's put some anti X Wing tech in here and let's have some fun.
Like it, yeah. And you do have a little bit of, kind of anti-mains. I mean, you do have, Circle's Now Complete, two Vaders. People don't always expect this card. It's always available, but
Mm-hmm.
we don't always know when to see it. So it's nice to
I
see
land
that
that
here.
card
Yeah.
so often in this deck. People just think, oh, why would he be playing that? Bang.
Well, it's true. I mean, when you're a space-focused deck, it's hard to put ground tech and vice versa. But
Mm-hmm.
I like the surprise aspect of having it here. So that's definitely cool. All right,
Yeah.
cool. All right. Anything else you want to mention, discuss playing this deck matchup wise, or
No,
anything before we move on?
no, it's a deep dive on TTO. Obviously, there are a million ways to play it. I think Dylan has a pretty cool style that uses Talon rolls. It's a lot better in the later sets where you've got the Talon Dark Maneuvers combo card. It gets really strong in Classic Novi because you get Short Range Fighter combo card and you get Dark Maneuvers combo card. Um, and that really opens up opportunities for tile ends. Um, but yeah, at this stage of the game, as far as retro P through Death Star 2, TTO is fun. It's not a top tier deck by any means. So
Okay,
you try to make it fun and you try to make it surprising, and you kind of take it at that.
that makes sense. Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so let's move on to the other deck that you said you really like. So you have your own version of Mind What You Have Learned based off of Cloud
Yep.
City. And I
Mm-hmm.
will admit, I have never seen someone try to make this work. So please introduce kind of how you came up with this and kind of how it plays.
Yeah. So this deck is a I would say it's a Joe Horby special. He is the original the genius behind this platform. I've tinkered it obviously, but we like to joke about jank decks. Um, Party Make Jank is often thrown around in the Discord channel, and jank just means dog shit. It means not good. It means sometimes really really good. It means certainly not uh, meta. And so what this deck is it's a platform that allows you to get on Cloud City and react and drain the piss out of people. Um, so a couple cool things with this deck are the man you just showed are the dark skinned brothers Lando and Pukamer. Um,
Yeah.
these guys are studs on Cloud City. Let me tell you. Um, this little guy right here adds one to all your drains on Cloud City, which is stupid. That is, he himself gives you drain bonuses like no qualifiers, don't have to have an alien, don't have to have a certain amount of whatever. It just
Right.
adds one to all your drains on Cloud City. That's sweet.
Period. Yes.
Yeah, period. He works great with Lando with Gun because Lando with Gun adds Battle Destiny with an alien on Cloud City. So you put those two guys together, you got two draws, you got a weapon, and it's not a lot of power, but it's just a good platform. You get a lift tube on Cloud City, and you put Obi-Wan or Luke with that lift tube. Now you can react to a battle with a stick. So essentially, what this deck is you play Mind What You Have Learned to eliminate Sense and Alter. Essentially, it's +4 to all draws, so you're not totally eliminating it, but it gives you a baseline protection against getting sense and altered, and you're using a ton of red cards in this deck. Okay, so not a lot of characters, virtually zero starships except for one Falcon, and you know your goal with this deck is to essentially slow play your opponent into thinking you're not threatening, and then you just drain the piss out of them. It's got some fun cards in it. Glancing Blow, Courage of the Skywalker, anti hunt down tech that are people that are dueling. You're playing those just to avoid getting epic dueled because you have to have Obi-Wan or Luke with the lift tube in order for this to work. So for starters, this deck revolves around Obi-Wan and Luke, a lift tube, and Pukamer and Lando cruising around Cloud City and being able to spread very thin and then react to whatever battle that you need to. It's got cards to avoid battles, Path of Least Resistance, Imperial Barrier. It's got Class of Sabers, and it's a trap as well as Lift Tube Escape. All provide you recourse for beatdown management. It's a trap, allows you to cancel the battle. Lift Tube Escape allows you to move the lift tube away from a battle. So if they drop on your character with the lift tube, you can move away from that battle as react. That's a little known thing. It also allows you to cycle a 5 and a 6 into your reserve deck when you want to do some tracking, which is awesome. So if you have a lift tube on the table and you get lift tube escape, now you can shove a 5-6 right on top of your used pile, and now you can start retrieving or doing beatdowns. Surprise Assault is in there for that same reason. Late game, you shove that lift tube right back into your reserve deck and you hit a Surprise Assault. Maybe you deal 8 damage there. The deck uses the Landing Claw, Kessel, a Falcon, Captain Han, and Leia to do and I know Punch It. That's your standard, one trick pony. If they're not playing a lot of space, I know Punch It, Falcon, Super Falcon can get you as much as you need out of space. Kessel's just in there to satisfy a battleground if you need that. If they're playing battle order against all your drains on Cloud City, often what'll end up happening is I just get the Landing Claw and the Falcon, and I've got any old pilot in there, and I'm just trying to satisfy locating or having presence at a system and not getting charged for my drains. But yeah, this deck uses Yoda at his hut because you can pull it with the objective, which gives you early activation. It gives you the immunity to attrition -2, which can, often really save your characters, quite honestly. And then it has Ula and Tawas Ka in there, which are 2 aliens that work nicely with Lando to get that battle destiny. As well as, if for whatever reason, if you're able to get Ula down and keep her in a lift tube and keep her from getting attacked, because this deck is essentially an evasion deck, you can start to control their hand mid to late game, which can be painfully annoying if you don't have a lot of cards on the table as the Imperial. So this deck is very janky. It is by no means a good deck. It's fun as hell to play, and you can really frustrate some people that haven't seen it before. Between just packing big destinies, having the projections of Skywalker in there to mitigate early damage, having on the edge, off the edge, to get a retrieval loops going. It's a pretty card thin deck, but the core of the deck really is just a mind what you have learned platform to mitigate sense and alters, to get Yoda to help you out as far as your attrition, and to have some fun on Cloud City, because I love Cloud City, so that's my favorite place to play.
No, I like it. And, Cloud City was, the favorite spot, ever since the Cloud City set, pretty much, because the first one we had like Son of Skywalker. And,
Mm-hmm.
it's always interesting. A lot of people returning to GAMP that haven't like played Star Wars. A lot of them try to make Cloud City light side decks, right? A lot of them try to, do the objective for the light side, quiet mining colony, right? And it's always, you know, people like to make this work, but as you gain skill, it's really hard to make this work. It really limits you.
It
Um,
does.
so in your deck, unlike quiet mining colony, you have to do all these requirements to flip. You just, deploy any any Cloud City site you want to, and you're able to drain. And so what, this one's a two drain, I guess, and this one is also it's a two drain if you have Lando here, basically.
Yep.
Yeah.
They're all interior. That's the big part of this deck is you're using no exterior sites, so no ATATs, no you're not opening up yourself to that line of attack. You're keeping everything inside.
Correct. Correct. As far as your game plan goes, so obviously you're starting Dagobah system. Obviously, you only have one site. You want to deploy Yoda set as soon as you possibly can.
I think
Um,
our call is going to end also, just FYI, based on the time. So we have to restart the Google Meet.
oh, okay. Are you still there? Okay. All right. Go
So
ahead.
one of the other things I was going to say is something that I like to do as a player, especially like in tournaments where people are watching all your games. I do this a lot. Is I will have two or three decks that are using the exact same objective, and they're completely different decks. So I'll often play variants of uh, like for the dark side, carbon chamber testing, or for the light side, mine when you have learn is a great platform because you can go so many different ways with it. Same thing with profit. So one thing I do like to do is to throw a lot of curveballs at people when I play. Um, one cool thing with carbon chamber testing, specifically on the dark side, is the fact that you get to start the game with a rebel of an opponent's can sometimes completely break somebody's deck. Um, there are very few people that play that way, but I've actually ran into tournament games where people are only playing with like a Luke or a Obi-Wan with stick, and they're playing like an all space deck. And because I played this objective where you get to steal a character, well, now they can't satisfy um, their battle order or their battle plan because you've taken their character and you've imprisoned them in the Cloud City security tower. Um, and so that's just like a fun example of things that you can do with certain objectives. Um, you know, uh, Again, with the carbon chamber testing, a not a good objective, by no means a meta objective, but being able to carbon freeze someone and deal anywhere from 8 damage to 6 damage if they're doing honor, you know, can be a nice start to your game. It can make them have to stop it. It can make them force their play to what you're doing. So I guess that's something that I like to do. Is uh, I like to give my opponents a script and then have them follow that script and be in control, as opposed to just building decks that are good everywhere. That is really like the good meta players that are playing Rel Ops, that are playing Bring Him Before Me, that are playing Hunt Down. Those decks have a very well, maybe Rel Ops has kind of an order with which you have to do things, but like the Bring Him Before Me and Hunt Down decks, they provide so much just good cards and access to high powerful characters and vehicles and board presence, that a lot of times your path to victory is a lot more achievable and easier and less draw reliant um, than Party McFly jank decks, or like the very heady decks that like probably like my favorite um, deck designer like Bastion. Some of his crazy German ideas, that we have seen play out over the years, just require like an immense amount of card tracking and very specific scenario planning and how you use the deck dependent upon who you're playing. One of his favorite decks of mine that I love to play is his Profit deck, which on paper looks like trash. Um, when you pilot it, if you've never played it, it plays like trash. But once you get some repetitions with that deck, you find, oh my god, uh, there is a method to this madness, and if you can figure out that method, you can turn into a mad scientist. Um, but yeah, you got one right there. The Winklehouse 2021.
Yeah. I don't know if you made changes since then, but yeah, this is the deck you used in that
Mm-hmm.
tournament, that retro tournament. Correct. And
I love this deck. I love this deck. It's one of my favorite decks to play often. I play this deck when I'm in a bad mood because I want to have some fun. Um, Again, you have to know how to play this thing. I am not Bastion, and so I would not be able to do it justice. But there's a lot about this deck that on paper looks very, very, very interesting and difficult. But man, that's where I find so much love and enjoyment in this game of Star Wars CCG, where you know the nuances. I love to play chess. I love strategy games. Um, I gave Star Wars Unlimited a try, but I have never been able to get away or quit Star Wars CCG just because of the level of variability in your interactions, the deck making, the situations and the scenarios that are both planned for and unplanned. It's just such a wonderful game. It's just pure game theory in so many ways, which is also why I struggled to find value playing meta at its highest levels because I don't like to be, like no one puts party in the corner. Uh, I don't want to be forced to have to play something in order to thrive. And again, that's why I've never really finished, above top 15 during any of these retro tournaments since I kind of started playing. Um, but I usually feel confident that I can give most people a run in any given game or any format up to probably Reflections too. I'm not that good at Classic No V yet.
Yeah. No, I no, and I think that's one of the things about this game. There's a bunch of people that are going to play super competitive, and some people play for fun, and there's like a mix between, and
Mm-hmm.
I'll be interested to see how this next sprint goes out, what people play for, and we do want deck variation, and I like the fact that you're a tinkerer like me, and you try to find you call it jank, but there's some gems here, and there's reasons
There is.
behind your choices here, and if you get the right cards, you can give any deck a run for their money, depending, I think, and
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of what I like about it.
Yeah, that's me in a nutshell. I've got a lot. I've gotten a lot of really like I've beaten quality players. I've beaten, Chew. I've beaten. I've had wins in retro sealed or not retro sealed, but retro tourneys that have been at the, because I've created decks that don't, that's create scenarios that aren't normal. Um, and so if they're not normal and you're not getting a warning indicator, now you can walk somebody into a trap, or you can walk them into a beatdown, or you can walk them into a situation where they're not expecting it. But yeah, maybe someday I'll crawl out of my, you know, top 15 to 20. I think probably in the last 3-4 years in the retro league, like cumulative standings, I've probably been top 20, I would say, the last 3-4 years. I'd have to look. I think I was joking with Will Tarbox because he's been 13 or 14 and I've been 14 or 15 the last, like we've been right next to each other and he keeps beating me by one overall cumulative seed. Um, but I really like that guy, SW2 Moon. He's a good guy. And so yeah, I mean, like I don't care about my my overall ranking, but I do like to be competitive.
Yeah,
I think that's the sweet spot, and I think you'll find most people don't have a problem with me. Um, Obviously, like anybody, I can have my bad days, and I'll call people out on their bullshit. I'm not somebody that's gonna to be quiet about things. I'm a pretty pro confrontational, but I'm very fun loving. Um, I'm very, I do this first and foremost because I think it's the most pure game that I can play, and I love playing games. But I'm not the guy who sits in the corner and counts his victory tallies and must win to feel fulfilled. So I hope people in general enjoy playing with me, and I will give a lot of credit to Dark Deal. When I was coming on to Jump in 2020, he helped me get a lot of reps when I really sucked at this game. Uh, so a lot of people pipe 29. You know, guys that I've played thousands of games with. Um, have really been integral to me catching up to understand this game. And then obviously, Joe Horby and SWC player, as far as being surrounded by better players, is always really important. I think you know, the more you play with people that are good because they play by the rules, they play the meta, they understand the meta. I think that's always helpful too, is to be exposed to players that have a higher, like, that have that top end skill cap. Um, but again, it's a dead game, so it's not like there are new tricks that can, pretty much everything has been discovered at this point. It's just how you tweak it, I guess. But yeah, that's me, and that's a couple decks. Hopefully that creates some fun content with that. Any other questions?
Yeah, I think I just want to ask and know I appreciate what you said, and know I'm grateful for a lot of the people playing on GIMP, and it's been a pleasure playing with you. But SWC player and Joe have helped me on Discord some too, and you emailed me back some ideas a while ago, and I appreciate that too. Um, and maybe just kind of a brief run through this deck of how I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
talked about Super Falcon. If you grab a site, do you deploy it immediately? I mean, you have some things like you have surprise assaults, like how much you're tracking. I mean, you have three retrieval methods. Maybe help people understand if they want to try this deck or a version of this deck. Like how much do you keep your cards to your hand versus how much you deploy, and kind of how do you like manage your deck? This kind of
Yeah,
thing.
absolutely. So as far as playing this deck, turn one, is getting Dagobah working for you. Obviously, you want to pull out the hut and get your activation started. Um, I'll throw Yoda down if I see him in there on turn one. Um, but that's going to depend if the opponent is giving me one force or not, to be able to put him down there. It's important with this deck that obviously, like, if you don't have a battleground on Cloud City, you're not just going down with one, you have to have two. So that would be the only thing that is going to prevent me from playing a location if I only have or playing characters. If I get one location out of those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Cloud City sites, I'm not going to stack a location if there's not a lift tube and another location to hop over to, or path of resistance over to, unless I have, like, you know a, a, a like, if I had Han with his gun and Luke, or Han and Leia, or something that's like not going to get completely steamrolled. The point being with this deck, and I played a game like yesterday. I was playing a hunt down, like classic hunt down deck, and I got my ass kicked. But it wasn't an ass kicking in the sense of like the game was, I had lost by 14 force or something like that. But it was because I was playing the deck fighting a lot, and so this deck is, you're not trying to fight with this deck. Um, you're not trying to engage the opponent. You're trying to have the opponent come to you and then avoid them, and set up scenarios where you can tick, tick, tick. It's hard for the dark side to fight you at 3 locations at a time. Typically, the dark side can fight you at like 2 locations at a time. Maybe they've got like a Vader stack and a Mara stack, or like a IG and a bounty hunter and a like, you know what I'm kind of saying? Like, typically you're not going to get hit at an interior location because you don't have the threat of an AT-AT, you don't have the threat of getting trampled, you don't have the threat of those cards. Um, you're not looking to get into a lot of fights, because again, you've only got 16 characters in this deck, and not all of them are fighting characters. So you, as far as like deploying, again, you're trying to get a lift tube on the table with a lightsaber, and then you're trying to have at least 2 locations so that you can react away or react to, um, or establish that early threat of draining for 3. If you get Pukamer and any character down on like turn 2, and you're threatening a drain of 3, they don't have a battle plan up, or they don't have, they've already committed, like maybe they're playing Hunt Down and they've put Vader at Endor Docking Bay. Well, good luck getting into Cloud City if you're not playing Cloud City Docking Bay. I'm not playing any Cloud City Docking Bays. So this deck thrives if you can get the opponent to commit to coming down on the table early. Um, And again, if they're like a classic hunt down deck that's playing Death Star Docking Bay and Endor, and they're not using Cloud City Docking Bay, which most meta decks use Cloud City Docking Bay, but not all. Um, they're not getting Vader over there, especially if there's no way to get him from his location. So as far as like deploying cards, you're kind of trying to slow bait people with this deck into thinking like, what the hell is this guy playing? He's playing Mind What You Have Learned. He deploys Yoda. Okay, is he training? Well, he's not. He doesn't have the training effect, so he's probably not training. Okay, is he playing? Is he playing a mains deck? Well, why is he not playing Hidden Base? Like, why is he playing Mind What You Have Learned? So the idea is to get them kind of confused. And then you play a location like the lower passage, or you play the guest quarters, or you play the carbon chamber, and you're creating this sense of, all right, he's playing on Cloud City. Why is he playing on Cloud City? This doesn't really make a lot of sense. And so you just want to confuse the opponent. And then hopefully they do something stupid. Um, Deploy Vader off Cloud City. Um, maybe they're playing RAL ops, right? And they're getting their RAL ops generator going. Great, great. Hopefully I can draw my projections of Skywalker, and I don't care if you -1 me because I'm going to be pinging for 3 and 2s at minimum with Pukamer. Uh, Imperial Decree obviously can become a problem that pretty much kills this deck. So it's not it's by no means immune to the silver bullet of drain cancelers. It's a drain deck. So any drain deck is going to have to combat Imperial Decree. And you can try to fight against it by not letting him not letting him occupy Ralatir and Wakilum or whatever. Or you can just say, well, if they're playing Decree, I'm kind of hosed. So again, those are the trade-offs you make when you play janky decks. Is it's kind of like you can protect against a lot of scenarios, but certain cards are going to be silver bullets for you. And most good players will say, oh, that's stupid. Why did you play those decks then? And the answer to that is because it's fun. So Decree will kick your ass. But yeah, you want to slow play this deck. You don't want to run out and look for a fight. You're not trying to put yourself in a situation where you're suffering because you're reacting to the opponent. You have retrieval in here, so it's okay to top deck. There are no cards in this deck that are make or break it. It would suck if you lost your lift tube escape or if you lost both of your lift tubes. But the way I look at it is I have so many high destinies and I have 3 retrieval cards that if I lose something early, I'll have a chance to get it back. So I try not to worry about early damage, and I don't try to rush into anything.
That makes sense. So yeah, so if you can get your opponent to deploy early, then your need to fight is less, then your ability to track your destiny, retrieve, and play that drain race game. You can, and if they do fight you, then you have lots of abilities to get away, and then your lift tube can also move you to a battle, so that can be a good surprise too. So no, I like the versatility of it, and what you're able to potentially do, obviously.
I think that what I would like to see in this deck that I have tried is using Don't Get Cocky and Gift of the Mentor, which are just like life debt Destiny adders. I love Destiny adder decks. Probably my favorite in formats up to Endor. Um, I love setting people up with multiple Destiny drops. It's just really hard to be dependent on Han and Luke. This deck doesn't run Chewie, so life that obviously isn't a choice. But I do keep I know in there for the Han and Leia drop. I used to use the Gift of the Mentor, and I would run Anakin Saber as well, and I'd chuck that down on Leia or to add to a drain bonus, which again gives you the 2 battle destiny with Obi-Wan and Luke. Often, you put put one of those guys on a lift tube, the other one at another location, and then react over, drop a gift, and now you've got 2 swings and 2 extra battle destiny. So this deck, has the potential to be a standard beatdown, but I found it to be a little bit more successful playing the evasion drain race game, unpredictability, and because if they lose a fight with this deck, if you lose a fight or you get a clash or something like that, you get one turn where you hit them for 3 drains of 2, 3, and 2. It's hard to recover, man. Like 1 or 2 turns, if you get 3 or 4 Cloud City locations down and you're hitting them at 3 of those locations, you can do a lot of damage really quickly. And I think that's what people don't understand about decks like these is it's like it can snowball almost immediately. One lift tube, one Obi-Wan, a Pukamer, and a Lando. That's 3 locations draining for potentially 3, 3, and 2. And you can react and support each one of those with the lift tube. So yeah, could they sense your react? Yeah, you could get screwed for sure. Hopefully then you've got your backup, you've got your other opportunities to evade that battle. But again, it's by no means a sense proof deck. You just have that mine would you have learned to add 4 to their draws. So you're hoping that, they're drawing that 3 or 2, depending upon if they have the Emperor.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, no, I didn't have a whole lot to say here. Your deck choices make sense what you're given. No, I think most of my questions as to why are pretty much answered.
Good. I'm glad. I hope you find value. I hope you enjoy editing this together or whatever. And I'm always here to answer questions. And good. Yeah, let me know if you have if you need anything else, and I'll see you out there in the world of Star Wars CCG.
I will see you soon, sir. It's been a pleasure. Thanks so much.
All right, take care. Bye.
Bye.